feels like I'm like on a news anchor or something.
Yeah.
I mean, isn't that what podcasting kind of is?
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah.
And today we're back on this episode of the Nightly News. Man, remember when Brian Williams used to anchor that?
No.
You don't? You never watched the Nightly News?
I don't watch the news, dude.
That's fair.
What?
There we go.
Oh, I see. This is how we're introing.
Yeah, I tried, man. I tried.
Okay, I'll take it. Good morning, afternoon, and or evening, everyone. Thank you for coming back and hanging out with us. As always, we are your hosts, the Genesius guys. I'm Nick.
Filling in for Kyle, I'm Seth.
And I'm John.
And we are three Catholic dudes who love to talk about movies. This right here is the Genesius podcast. How we doing today, guys?
Good. Pretty good.
Yeah, pretty good. I mean, the weather is really, really nice this weekend.
Oh my gosh.
Okay. It's only like 30 degrees out, but it feels like it's like 60 because we've been used to like negative degrees.
Well, considering it was like 15 below on like Tuesday, it like, yeah, because I was coming out from mass this morning, and I'm going to a couple places after this, so I parked my car in the parking lot, so I don't have to open and close the garage over and over again.
Yeah.
But I was getting out of my car, I'm just like, holy cow, like it's actually nice out today.
It is. You know, earlier this week was the kind of cold where you breathe in and the inside of your nose freezes. And you're just kind of
and those of us with beards, like stuff like freezes on your beard.
If you're wearing something over the beard, like the frost condenses and you look like you belong on an LL Bean catalog.
Oh, so last week I did my shirt kind of hints of this. So I did the polar plunge last weekend. With some of our friends from softball. And I remember it was like 7 degrees, like air temperature. Like it was very cold.
Yes.
So when we jumped in the lake and we came back out, and I could feel my beard and hair freeze. And well, actually, even before we jumped in, Megan looks at me and she's just like, there's already condensation on your mustache, and that's gross.
If it says anything, so I was going to the Winter Carnival in St. Paul.
That's cool.
I accidentally like slid a little bit and like spilled some of my hot chocolate, and it like froze on my jacket before I could wipe it off. It was just like frozen. I was like, well, I have to wait until it heats up to like actually clean it off.
Yeah, there goes that, I guess. No, that seems dangerous.
Polar plunge?
Jumping in a frozen lake.
Oh, yes. I would not.
Well, okay. So one, it is to raise money for Special Olympics. Yeah. So it goes toward a good cause. But also, like, if the weather drops, if the air temperature drops below 0, they cancel it.
Oh, so 0 is their mark.
0 is their mark, yeah.
Because, anything above that is pretty warm.
Well, I mean,
the polar plunge has already had a fatal accident.
Shocking.
Jack and the Titanic.
Wow.
I
can't.
Wow.
I can't.
Where is it? You need the
Oh, there we go.
Yep.
Or you could.
Yeah.
No, not that.
Let the hey. Let the professional handle the soundboard.
That was probably
gentlemen.
a better call.
Thank you.
Hands off. Keep your hands inside your podcasting boots.
The intern is trying to take over.
It's not the first time I have reached across.
Oh no, certainly not. I'm meow. Now, sir, you've gone too far.
You mean
Meow.
Sir, you've gone too far.
Meow. Sir, you've gone too far. I'm gonna click the other meow button. All right, I feel like we're getting already off track here. We should.
This happens every episode.
It does.
I mean, this is what people come for, right?
Yeah. I mean, I'm gonna grab my drink.
To it.
I'm gonna grab my drink, but they're here for this, so we're gonna crack our drinks. Ooh, yeah, get that good soundbite in there. You've already cracked yours?
Yeah, well, that's okay.
Cheers, gents. All right,
to the podcast.
To the podcast. Nick, what are we talking about today?
Today we're going back in time a little bit
To before my time.
I know, you old fart.
I can tell you exactly where we're going back in time to.
If it says anything, this movie is older than I am. Older than you guys.
Well, if it's older than you, then it's most certainly older than we are.
No. The difference between the age of when this movie was to when I was born.
It's exactly the same?
Right?
It's older than he is older than us.
Oh.
That's what he's saying.
Yeah.
Okay, I kind of get it.
That's a rough
Simple,
draw there, John.
simple math.
That's
Anyway, we are talking about probably one of the most beloved movies of the 1980s.
The Breakfast Club. Yeah.
The Breakfast Club.
Yeah.
So this is our first listener request by one Katie Hines. She requested this movie for us to talk about here on the show. And I gotta say right off the bat, because I've watched this movie several times.
Mm-hmm.
It is very much like, I don't know. It's really hard to describe what this movie is because it's so deep. It is the coming of age story of many coming of age stories.
John, what did you describe it as yesterday?
Oh, it was a character study.
Character study.
That's what I kind of saw it as.
I thought that when I was watching it on Friday, I absolutely thought, I'm like, this is like a deep dive character study.
Now, I took him one further, and I said that this isn't a character study because the characters by themselves are pretty stereotypical. This is a relationship study. This is about you put 5.5 characters, the half being the principal, 5.5 in a room, and you kind of force them to spend a day kind of interacting with each other.
Well, and they can't do anything else. Like
they're stuck.
He even says like that they weren't allowed to talk.
Yeah.
So not even interacting with each other. They kind of just did.
Mm-hmm.
Well, one specific person.
Well, if you're forced to be with somebody for 8 hours, okay, pre-cell phones.
Yes. Yeah.
Spend 8 hours with people. You're going to talk at some point.
Well, yeah, I would hope so.
Yeah, it's
in-person conversation is really undervalued these days. What the hell was that?
our soundboard.
It just did its own thing.
So I will note when I set this up today, the screen was actually coming off of the board a little bit, like the adhesive messed up. So hopefully this thing is still working. We apologize, listeners and viewers.
If random sounds just happen.
If random sounds just happen, we're gonna hear them too. It was just that. Yes, that was the button.
Yeah,
you've pressed it again.
This is becoming a trend.
Hands off, bucko.
Buckaroo
sport.
Yeah,
old sport.
It was a Iron Giant callback. Yeah.
That's sport.
Nice.
But yeah, it seems like a relationship study to me because all the characters by themselves are not maybe necessarily as interesting as when you put them all together and all their differences clash.
Mm-hmm.
And so, let's run through some of the stats. I don't want to talk too much more before we actually talk about the movie.
Yeah, but I will say the discussion is going to be really good.
It's going to be interesting.
So, Breakfast Club, written and directed by the John Hughes.
Mm-hmm.
Who
definitely feels like a John Hughes movie.
Oh yeah, I think this is I would argue this is the most famous John Hughes movie of all time.
Yeah, because I don't know him from anything else.
Well,
what's something else that he's done.
He's done St. Elmo's Fire. Well, I don't know if he did St. Elmo's Fire. He did 16 Candles, which is another really iconic 80s movie.
Okay, I've not seen it.
Would you say this is more iconic than 16 Candles? I don't know.
It is if I've heard of it. Before 16 Candles.
I guess you're the neutral party.
I would say this and 16 Candles are like the definitive John Hughes movies.
Okay.
I know John Hughes also, and guys, this was inevitable, but John Hughes movies did inspire what Spider-Man Homecoming turned out to be.
Okay, that's fair.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
In what way?
Like Spider-Man Homecoming is a high school superhero movie, and a lot of the high school stuff was inspired by like John Hughes.
You know, I do get that
And
vibe.
his
Oh, here we go.
Yeah.
I was just double checking. Ferris
Okay.
Bueller's Day Off is also John
That's
Hughes.
right. I forgot he did. I forgot he did Ferris
that one,
Bueller.
that one's more iconic, probably.
And also Planes, Trains, and
Probably.
Automobiles. And,
Oh,
and Uncle Buck. So
those are good.
They're
Those
all
are good
in
movies.
the 80s though. So I haven't seen Weird Science.
Has he done anything since?
I also have not seen Weird Science. Well, he died like in the 90s or 2000s.
Oh, okay.
Maybe. I could be wrong.
Okay, there's my lack of knowledge.
But it's definitely like comedies in the 80s. Is what
Yes.
Yeah, it's very much like you can tell when a movie is made by John Hughes or like inspired by something John Hughes has done.
Mm-hmm.
Psych did an episode that paid homage to.
Well, they do
John
a lot of
Hughes.
like 80s stuff in that.
Yeah, but I would say that was one of my favorite episodes in the show, and I would also argue it is one of the best episodes in the series. It's the episode in the beginning of the third season where they have the high school reunion.
Mm-hmm.
Very John Hughes inspired. But it's a very good episode.
Yeah.
Nice.
Anyway, so came out on February 15th, 1985. This was not the highest grossing movie in 1985. Hopefully we'll talk about that series in our upcoming.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
It should be obvious what the
Yes.
highest grossing 1985 movie was.
Yes. Okay.
And it had a budget of only $1 million, which makes sense given what it was.
Yeah, you can kind of tell. There's not much. To it.
But it made over 50 times that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it was very successful relative to its budget.
Rotten Tomatoes critic score was 89, and the audience gave it a 92, which makes sense. Like this was a very well received movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the USCCB has to say this. And this is another show first. So the USCCB says this: 5 teenagers spend a Saturday detention in their school library. After much abrasive interchange and a little marijuana, they become downright chummy when they realize they share common attitudes about adult authority figures, drugs, and sex. Under John Hughes' direction, the movie lacks any critical perspective, seeming to justify antisocial behavior, casual sex, and the concept of drugs as a harmless escape, if not a liberating experience. And the USCCB dubs this an O, which stands for offensive,
Wow.
and it's rated R.
Wow. Interesting.
Well, it is rated R, right?
yes,
It is, it is rated R. Like,
Because they draft the F word a lot. So
oh yeah, the F-bomb is very
that alone would give it an
prevalent in
R.
this movie.
Yeah. But there's also some other stuff too. So yeah, that's interesting. You know, I see a lot of the synopses. I see a lot of these sort of summaries of the movie talking about the kids being like good friends by the end of this, and that is not the vibe I get.
No.
I definitely did not.
Well, and they even kind of say this kind of toward the end. It's just like they're all kind of they're all being like vulnerable and like friendly now, but it's like, well, as goes in high school culture, which we talked a little bit about this in our Mean Girls episode, which you can find not on YouTube, unfortunately, but like on if you go to your podcasting apps, it should be there earlier. It's our 7th episode when Katie was our guest.
Yeah.
One
Isn't it the second most watched?
third most listened to episode, which is amazing considering we recorded it like 3 months ago.
Yeah.
Anyway, so we talked about this a lot. Like high school culture, it's like they're just like, well, we're friends now, but once we go back to school on Monday, like we are like no association.
Yeah, they do. It does kind of seem like they don't really expect this to last. And we'll talk about that too after we do the synopsis. Do we want to just jump into that?
Go for it.
Might as well, because there's some good discussion to be had, and let's get into it.
It's oddly kind of a dark movie.
Not even oddly, like it's pretty clear in the first like 10 minutes that it's gonna be very dark.
All right, here we go. This is from Wikipedia, ladies and gentlemen.
The most reliable source on the internet.
Most reliable source on the internet, obviously. On Saturday, March 24th, 1984, 5 students at Shermer High School.
Was actually on a Saturday, by the way. I did check.
They did their research.
They did. They did the research.
That's good.
But it also has nothing to do with the book 1984. So.
Oh, thank goodness.
Yeah. On Saturday, March 24th, 1984, 5 students at Shermer High School in Shermer, Illinois, report at 7 a.m. For an all-day detention. Nerdy Brian Johnson, varsity wrestler Andrew Clark, introverted outcast Allison Reynolds, popular snob Claire Standish, and rebellious delinquent John Bender. I did not know Claire's last name was Standish, and that totally checks out.
Well, that was
Sorry,
that was
no offense to anyone with last name Standish out there.
Well, that was also not established in the movie because that's the first. This is the first time I'm hearing it.
Yeah,
I didn't even know the outcast name.
Yeah. So Reynolds, Allison, that's her name. Yeah, in a voiceover,
that's said in the movie. They said the outcast name in the movie.
Oh, okay.
In voiceover, the 5 are described respectively as a brain, an athlete, a basket case, a princess, and a criminal. They gather in the school library where Vice Principal Richard Vernon warns them not to talk, move from their seats, or sleep until they are released at 4 p.m. He assigns them each, a 1,000-word essay.
Yeah, yep, correct.
Yeah, it is each.
Because this summary does not say each, but he assigns each of them a 1,000-word essay in which each must describe who you think you are. Mm-hmm. He leaves, returning only occasionally to check on them and reprimand them. So John, basically right off the bat, John Bender, they mostly just call him Bender throughout the film. Yep. So if I refer to him as Bender, don't be surprised.
Kind of reminds me of Futurama, but
so John immediately is just like ignoring the rules.
Bender's the robot, right?
Correct.
Okay, that's what I thought.
He bends things.
Very astute.
I can't.
John Bender ignores the rules and spends most of his time bullying or harassing Claire, Brian, and Andrew. Having a completely he also has a completely hostile relationship with Vernon, the vice principal, and defiantly talks back to and insults him, which results in John receiving 8 weekends worth of additional detention.
2 months.
Yeah. The only person that seems to keep John on his toes, Bender on his toes, is the janitor, who has a very brief scene somewhat early on in the movie, like the first-ish act. And the way he responds to Bender is not what Bender is expecting. Mm-hmm. It's a very short scene, but you can just tell from Bender's reaction that this janitor is not to be messed with.
Which scene are you talking about?
He just comes in and he's just like, I'm the eyes and the ears of this school. Like I see.
Yeah, I know everything.
I thought you were talking about the scene where the principal and Bender are in the closet.
No.
Oh,
that's later on.
Side note.
Yeah.
In the very opening scene, just because I went and rewatched the beginning, they show a picture of the guy who is the janitor as being the man of the year.
Oh, you're right.
Wow.
So he used to be like the stuff in high school.
Interesting. So that's wow.
I like to believe he still is.
Well, he might be. So John gets 8 weekends worth of additional detention. At one point after lunch, the 5 sneak out of the library to, before we even get there, there's one point where John decides to enact his first kind of prank where he goes and basically the principal had locked the door open. And so John not only takes the door off of the lock and closes it, he actually removes the screws.
He unscrews the thing in
the hydraulic.
Yeah, the thing that keeps it. Yeah.
And then the door just slams shut and it won't stay open anymore. And that's how John ends up getting 8 weekends of additional detention.
I mean, it was really talking back.
Yeah, he was talking back.
It was, but
that was the start of it for sure.
Yeah, the principal basically singles him out, even though he didn't see Bender do it. He just kind of assumes it was him, which he was correct. But
this time.
But interestingly, the students all cover for John and play dumb. So we'll talk about that.
Because I think nobody really likes being like stared at.
Yes.
And like forced to do something.
So at one point, the 5 sneak out of the library to retrieve John's marijuana stash.
Smitches get stitches.
At one point, the 5 sneak out of the library.
It's true.
To retrieve John's weed stash. John allows himself to be apprehended by Vernon in order to give the others time to return to the library undetected. John is locked in a storage closet where he is legitimately threatened by the principal. But he escapes and returns to the library by crawling through the ceiling panels. The others help John hide and cover for him when Vernon comes to investigate a noise caused by John falling through the ceiling in the library. The students pass the time by talking, arguing, listening to music, and smoking weed. Gradually, they open up and reveal their secrets and their poor relationships with their parents. Claire's popularity subjects her to intense peer pressure, and her parents use her to get back at each other during arguments. She is in detention due to skipping school to go shopping. John's father, Bender's father, is physically and verbally abusive to him. And
when did they say why Claire was in detention? I never caught that.
Yeah, that was news to me. John's father is physically and verbally abusive to him and his mother, and according to Vernon, is in detention for pulling a false fire alarm. Andrew is unable to think for himself as his father emotionally abuses him to succeed in wrestling and view any form of weakness with contempt. He was sent to detention for taping another kid's glutes together.
Larry, oh gosh, I have it written somewhere. It's like Larry, like he got in detention for taping Larry Lester's butt cheeks together.
Yeah.
Yes. In order to look superior and win his father's approval, because his father would always talk about the crazy stuff he did in high school.
He wanted his father to think he was cool.
Yes. Brian is under such pressure from his parents to get good grades that he contemplated suicide after getting an F in shop class. Checks out. He was sent to detention for bringing a flare gun to school for that purpose, and his parents are inconsiderately unbothered by this attempt. Although once he reveals it was a flare gun, everyone kind of starts laughing, and that breaks the tension a little.
Well, I mean,
yeah, because it went off in his locker.
And
it burned the lamp that he made.
Wait a minute, though. That might have been because it says here in the summary that John is in detention for, according to Vernon, for pulling a false fire alarm. Did he pull the fire alarm for the flare gun fire?
No, probably not.
That's actually interesting in the sense of like, what if the fire alarm went off because of the flare gun?
Yeah, who knows?
And then they blamed him for pulling
that. See, that's more believable.
I'm gonna stick that.
Just given how the principal was talking to him, like that's actually not the most wild speculation.
Yeah, it's speculation. I'm gonna leave it. So yeah, he was sent to detention for bringing a flare gun to school in order to commit suicide. Allison is a compulsive liar with neglectful parents who constantly steals random items for their use should she ever decide to run away from home. She clearly kind of fantasizes about that possibility. Mm-hmm. She admits that she merely showed up to detention for lack of anything better to do. They all realize that despite their differences, they've kind of got similar problems. They got issues with their parents. They got issues with the school, right? Meanwhile, Vernon complains to the janitor, Carl, that students today are less respectful than they were earlier in his teaching career. Carl tells Vernon that he is the only one who has changed and that the students couldn't care less about what he thinks of them. In the end, Claire gives Allison a makeover, which sparks romantic interest from Andrew. Claire decides to break her pristine, innocent appearance by kissing John.
This felt really forced.
Although suspecting that their new relationships will end when attention is over, they believe their mutual experiences will change the way they look at their peers, potentially change the way they look at their peers. As the detention nears its end, the group requests that Brian, they're like, yo, Brian, you're clearly the smartest here. And like academically, you should do the essay. And Brian creates his masterpiece, which he's clearly thrilled by. Mm-hmm. And John returns to the storage closet, so Vernon doesn't, the vice principal doesn't think that he left. Brian leaves the essay in the library for Vernon to read after they leave. And as the students part ways, Allison and Andrew kiss. Claire and John kiss.
And Brian kisses his paper.
Brian kisses his paper that he wrote. Yes. That he left for Vernon. Allison rips Andrew's state championship patch from his jacket to keep, and Claire gives John one of her diamond earrings. As Vernon reads the essay, Brian writes how the and says in voiceover how the principals use stereotypes to make petty judgments of them, and states that each one of us, as pointed out in the start of the film, is a brain, an athlete, a basket case, a princess, and a criminal. Does that answer your question? And he signs the essay with, "Sincerely yours, The Breakfast Club."
Roll credits. And like actually roll credits.
As he walks home through the school's football field, John triumphantly pumps his fist in the air. Now,
It's an iconic shot.
Yeah.
It is.
Well,
it
it
is
just stops there, and then it is the "Don't forget about me."
Don't you forget about me.
Maybe we should just do a podcast about singing. Now,
No,
interestingly,
I mean, we'll get to that the beginning of March, about a month's time.
yes, that's true.
Foreshadow.
That's gonna be a funny.
Now,
episode.
can I ask something?
Yeah.
Sure.
Why the Breakfast Club? Why is that the name? Anyone?
Probably-
They didn't even eat breakfast together. They ate lunch
They
together.
ate lunch. Well, John did not eat lunch.
Well,
True.
I kind of took that as like it's Saturday morning detention.
Yeah. Because they don't leave at like the end of the day.
No, 4 p.m. They left at 4 p.m.
Yeah, it still seems more
Yeah.
like a lunch group.
Yeah, it's
The lunch, but then it makes it feel like you're like hanging out over lunch at like school.
Production.
If you said the lunch.
You know,
club.
hold on. I want to see if there's anything in here about, wow, Nicolas Cage was considered for the role of Bender.
Oh, that would be weird.
That would be super.
I
weird.
just scrolled down and that's the thing I saw.
Anyway, I did think. It definitely feels like club is the right word. I don't know. Like, I guess lunch doesn't sound right.
The lunch club. Yeah, that's not a great ring.
Oh, wow. On the Ferris Bueller's Day Off DVD commentary on the 2004 DVD version, Hughes revealed that he shot the two films concurrently to save time and money. So Breakfast Club.
I can see that.
Yeah.
That makes perfect
So
sense.
the actors rehearsed for 3 weeks and then shot the film in the order that it was cut. And
Sure.
some outtakes of both films feature elements of the film crews working on the other film. The first print was 150 minutes in length. Again, this is all Wikipedia. We're lazy. Disclaimer.
150 minutes. in
Yeah,
length?
it was longer.
Dang. They definitely cut that down because it was only like 90, right?
yeah, it's not a
It
long
feels
movie.
longer than it is. Just I think it's just like the essence of like reminding you of just like what it feels like to sit in a room and have nothing
Well,
to do.
it's a really. I mean, it's pretty apparent from the beginning that it's gonna be a slow ride.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It starts off pretty. There's nothing. The musical choices in this film are quite strange because they.
I was definitely noticing this too. Just like, okay, most of the movie is like silent when it comes to like soundtrack. Except for like randomly throughout the movie to like emphasize different points. They'll just be like, here's a guitar, or whatever. You're like, well, okay.
I don't know. I actually really dug the choice of music in this movie.
No, I mean,
think
like
here's
the actual like songs, I think like fit
Right, but
into
like
the moment.
I know, but like, in particular, like I think when, Brian is talking about like, telling a story about him bringing the flare gun to school and how he was contemplating suicide. Like they played like sad, somber music in it. Like, the music choice, I think, was excellent.
It was not unplanned, for sure.
Yeah.
They clearly had intention with it. And I think the whole "Don't You Forget About Me," you know, it's on an interesting note, John. After Mass today, I was talking with someone and I told them what we were recording. And they were like, wait, why do they use that "Don't Forget About Me" song in the film? Like they asked me the same question that you asked me when I got home yesterday.
Well, I don't think that's like a misstep. I think it makes sense in regards to like how they're ending sentiment, right?
Yeah.
Like they're all like, oh, we're just gonna go back to our own lives, but it's like it's one of the things of like, oh, don't forget about this moment because like it was important to learn about other people, and I think that's actually like getting to a bigger question of what they're kind of asking of what at least like I appreciate about the movie.
Yeah. Go ahead. No.
It's just like learning other perspectives than your own. And I think that's like something that like we could all get a lesson on in the sense of like it's changing the determined notions of what you have of a person based on like what they're wearing or how they're acting or like
like outward appearance doesn't. And I mean, like I definitely say this. I say this with everyone. Like I mean, I'm somebody, and I think you guys have known me long enough where you've probably figured this out. I don't judge people, or at least I try not to. I'm not perfect at it, but like I try not to judge people based on their like their physical appearance or how they are. Like basically, like, I don't generally judge a person right away, but as I get to know them, I do pay very close attention to like what they say and like behaviors and actions and whatnot.
Yeah, I think it's hard to not have an initial impression of someone that you might act on. It's important that you check that and you always try to understand the other person. It's the same kind of thinking that gives you road rage, right? Of just like, this person has done something to anger me, like they've cut me off, or they're driving nuts or whatever, or they're in my way. And you don't know that they were trying to get to the hospital, right? Because their mother is dying or something, right?
Yeah.
And so, it's initial impressions are figure out, like they initiate a lot of how we act, but it's always important to check those things with compassion and with empathy. And so this whole thing, when I mentioned earlier, this is a relationship study. This is about students who treat each other initially off of the very surface level of how they see each other.
Well, like what was given at the beginning of the movie,
yes.
Right? The different stereotypes.
Yeah, and so they initially interact based on those things. Actually, there's a really funny moment at the start when they all get in. Brian and John go to take off their coats, and they lock eyes, and they stop.
Yeah.
And then Brian submits. He just
Brian submits.
Nope, you go.
He doesn't do anything else, and John takes off his coat first.
The thing is, like, I do think it establishes the characters like really quick.
Yes.
Like even just like them, like their parents dropping them off, right? Like you get the relationship of them in their family in each one. And like for instance, like John Bender just walks in and does not give a crap about like anything.
It's really,
like,
it's really
gets
clear.
run over.
I noticed this like I mean, like, even from the beginning, I definitely, because, like, again, I've seen this movie a few times.
Yeah.
It's really, like, they set up right away what, like, and I noticed this particularly with Brian. I think because Brian's a character I personally connected with the most.
So random side note.
Sure.
I would also agree. Okay. First of all, so just a question. Who connects most with which character?
Think of the name.
Yeah.
We're all going to say it at the same time. 3, 2, 1.
Brian.
Yep.
I knew that was going to happen.
But in honor of Brian, the character, do you notice something that I'm wearing?
Nice. Nice.
I
didn't even
noticed
catch
this
that.
at the end of the movie. Okay. He is wearing his sweater inside out the entire movie.
Is he really?
I was like, what the heck? I literally saw it at the end of the movie and I was like, wait a second. And I like rewound it and he's wearing it completely inside out. But,
I mean, there's one on the side though. I was talking about the back.
But
now I see it.
Does he really not care enough? Or does he not he might just be so unaware.
I think that's just a part of his characterization.
But anyway, I just thought that was a funny note.
Yeah.
That's great.
But
I figured that would be the character all three of us connected with the most.
Yeah.
But it's really, but you notice right away, like what Brian, like, you get a sense right away of what the character's issues are. Like, and the reason I point out Brian, like, specifically is because they established right away, like, his mom's just like,
yeah, go study.
Like, you better study while you're here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. Actually, at the beginning of the movie, there's this quote by David Bowie, and I did write it down because I thought it was really important.
Yes.
Interesting.
Go ahead and say it, and I'll talk about it.
So the quote is, I don't know if it was pulled from a song or something he said, probably a song because it's Bowie.
Yep.
But the quote is, and these children that you spit on us, they try to change their worlds, are immune to your consultations. They're quite aware of what they're going through.
Yeah. Basically saying, like, kids, they get their situation.
Kids are smarter than I think adults, like including us, give them credit for.
Well, and there's a tendency, right? As I'm not a parent, right? But I can kind of tell that as kids grow up, right, there is a really strong sense of the parents to continue to have like a vice-like grip on the world of their kids because they want a very, like when they're super young, that like the parents are the sole foundation of the kid's reality, right? And so they bring the kid everywhere. They teach the kid everything.
One thing I've noticed that, and like this is said, I've heard this a lot in like in podcasts or like just in general, that parents try to they essentially raise their kids to be better than they were.
Yeah. I think that's like the
It makes
American
sen- it
dream,
makes
right?
sense.
Is to like have things better for your kids than they were for you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's also, I have to make a side note. The transition out of that quote was jarring, to say the least.
I was gonna use that word.
Like the broken glass transition. I was like, what the heck am I watching?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you think hard enough about it, the choice makes a lot of sense, but in the moment, it is very, very jarring.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Yeah, that's correct.
So I do think it's like something to be said that like I think like the intro scene is also really interesting, that it shows like each of the different like why they are going to detention.
Well, they don't reveal
and
why they don't reveal why they're going there, but
it's like foreshadowing.
It definitely reveals the relationship between the teens and the parents. And I think it's fascinating that like, I mean, I know it sounds a little like, it probably doesn't sound as fascinating as it probably doesn't sound fascinating, but I think it is fascinating that it's like you picked teens from different social cliques.
Yeah.
And I think, and which it sounds like a dumb thing to say because like that's what makes the movie so fascinating.
Yeah.
But it's fascinating. But in the beginning, they established that because it's like you definitely see like all the kids have basically the same issues with like their families.
It's, you know, I as I thought about this movie more and more, actually that'll be my kind of concluding thought. No, it is interesting to see what happens, and it is honestly the only way that this movie works, right? If you have any two characters that are stereotypically aligned, it doesn't work out. But it's funny to not even funny. It's telling, I guess, is the word, to look at their lunches and tell from that, because Claire's got sushi.
Oh yeah, yep.
Brian's got
you can tell that like I mean, first of all, like everything about how they're dropped off, their lunches, and like what they're wearing. Like there's so many things that like set up like you kind of understand at least the preconceived notion of what each character is. Like she's a princess in the sense of like she's really rich, she has like really nice lunch. And then the athlete has like the biggest lunch ever. And
he's got
it's like 4 sandwiches, a banana.
He's got a bag of chocolate chip cookies, right? So he has the whole deal. He has enough there to actually easily feed everyone else.
Yes.
Right? And so also Brian has like the most not stereotypical. He has like the classic lunch of like the crustless PB&J.
Mm-hmm. Super nutritious.
Yeah, like the milk carton, all that.
Well, and Benner was kind of getting at that. He's like, oh, I can probably predict what's in here. Like he's having fun with it because he doesn't have anything.
Yep.
But then like I'll just use Allison. She's just like, she has a meal that her parents like made for her, but then she's just like, no, I'm gonna like do my own. Like for some reason that's like an iconic scene to me that I just remember from that movie. That's so weird. She like takes the meat and then throws it and it hits the statue or whatever. And it's like actually there for like the rest of the movie.
The iconic scene for me when it comes to that particular character is like initially when they're just like bored and she does this like really fancy drawing of like a wood side and she rubs her hair and it zooms out on the paper and she's using her dandruff as snowflakes.
It's so I actually find this fascinating. There's a YouTube channel that I've kind of watched a little bit on that does like the psychology of each of the main characters.
Wait,
in Breakfast Club.
This isn't cinema therapy, is it?
No.
Okay.
No, it's called like My Little Thought Tree or something.
Okay.
Like that.
Gotcha.
But anyway, I do find it fascinating that's like each
Seth,
of them
you should put a link to the video in like the show notes or something.
If
anyone wants to check it out.
Yeah, we'll see.
But it is really fascinating. Just like each of them is like believable characters, even though they are fairly stereotypical.
I mean, I always say stereotypes exist for a reason.
Yeah, but like from a filming standpoint, what I find interesting is each character has very much a distinct color palette.
Oh yeah.
Because like
right.
the athlete is like very blue like that, and like he's always wearing blue.
The princess is pink.
The princess is pink. The basket case is always black.
Yes.
And then Brian's like green, and Bender has like his red.
Red. And that's exactly it. You know, one of the
does that make me the athlete?
Sure.
That makes me the delinquent, apparently. Close enough.
I mean, it's not the most unbelievable thing.
I guess. But whatever you say, man. I guess. What are you in for? Loitering.
So anyway, like I looked up just for a second that because you were wondering like why was Claire in detention? She apparently skipped class to go shopping.
Yeah,
that's never said in the movie.
I know. It's like it's something that must be like assumed. And maybe that's why she got angry about like the earrings or something. Yeah. Like maybe she went shopping for.
I wouldn't have picked up on that though.
But
well, so let's talk about the principal for a minute, because we're talking about the kids a lot.
True. In a way, at least I feel like I might be closer to the principal's age than the kids' age.
You old fart, John. Did you say that? Did you say that just so I can make that joke?
Somewhat.
You totally did.
But it is interesting just thinking of like at least our roles in society right now are closer to the principal and janitor than they are to the kids.
That's really true.
That's sad.
So it does make me kind of like,
yes, it is, like, for sure.
Okay. So in the past, when I've seen this movie, I feel like it was mainly just focusing on John Bender. It's like, we want to make this the main character. He's really cool. He's like,
and it can seem like that, but he's the instigator, right? And so he is the catalyst for all of this happening. He cares so little about the rules that he is essentially forcing the other kids to interact with him. So that he can deconstruct them. He starts to deconstruct them. He makes assumptions about their character. For example, he assumes that Claire and Andrew are dating plus extra, right? He kind of assumes the whole thing. And so he's getting the students to interact. Some of this does not age well. He basically assaults Claire at one point. That was uncomfortable.
This podcast does not.
We don't endorse that.
Of doing things like that.
We don't endorse that.
Anyway,
but like, no. Continue.
You are Bender.
What?
But
we don't endorse that. That's not good.
I think it is something that like it's definitely his character that he's very aggressive and very like confrontational. Is like what he's going. But anyway, it definitely comes out with the principal. Like you can tell he's had fights with this principal over and over and over again. And I think because you're asking about like what do you think of the principal, and like especially being more of an adult now, it's just like that guy needs to move on. Like he's like he puts like way too much energy and cares what the kids think about. Like the janitor is like, to me, brings wisdom to like the whole group.
The janitor is probably the most mature character in the entire movie.
Yeah.
Well, and that's why I mentioned earlier, he's the only one that John really can't disarm, because the janitor is street smart.
Well, and he knows what John's doing.
Yes, he has a better insight into the kid's behavior than the actual principal. And I think the monologue he gives to John when he locks John in the supply closet is really telling, because even John is freaked out by the level of nutso that he gets from Vernon in this scene.
Well, he's so narcissistic.
He's narcissistic. He taunts John into hitting him, which of course John does not do because he knows that's taking it too far.
And he knows he'll go to jail.
And he knows he'll go to jail for that. And so this guy's like, the people here love me, and I'm the guy. And he basically goes on this narcissistic tirade. Yeah. And eventually it's like, wow.
Yeah. You can really see the issues with this movie is meant for kids. Like not like little kids, but I mean like kids that are old enough to see radar movies.
Sure.
college kids.
In the sense of like kind of going against the authority and seeing the issues with the authority in that case. I think he is not being a good principal in the sense of like he cares too much about what everyone thinks and he likes the power of being over them because they're younger, right? And he's like, oh, I'm in this sense of power and I'm going to use it against them. And that's just like the incorrect way of how like some authority happens.
Well, and
it's almost like a dictatorship.
And he doesn't like his job. He really doesn't like his job. It doesn't seem like it.
Yeah, he's not there for the kids. He there for the power.
He was idealistic at one point when he started his career, and I'm sure he even enjoyed it probably at the start based on how he talks about it in the film. He's the kind of person that enjoyed it maybe. But over time, as he's sort of moved up the ladder, he's kind of become very jaded about, and increasingly disconnected from the kids that he's supposed to be serving and teaching and helping.
Well, and it definitely goes to show that, like, okay, when he has free time and nothing else to do, right? He goes down to the classified files and sees how he's better than other people in his mind, right? Of like, oh, what's wrong with this person? What's wrong with like,
yeah.
Like that's messed up. Like,
well, and yesterday, it was yesterday. My girlfriend was talking about that's not necessarily out of place for a principal to be looking at those files.
It's not, but
what was the reason behind it?
The reason and the way he was doing it is what made it messed up.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. Yes, and so also they're typically more secured than.
Just anybody can walk in there.
Yeah, but which is I find it interesting, like the fact that he immediately tries to bribe the janitor is just tells you all you need to know.
The janitor tries to bribe him.
Oh yeah, the janitor blackmails him.
But I find it interesting that at the same time that the kids are connecting, they're also kind of connecting because, like, I don't know, the wisdom again. Carl's like, I think I should talk to this guy. Like, I think he needs some help.
Carl is the ghost of principal's past. He's like, come on, the only person that's changed is you. You're delusional, you know.
But I think this like is maybe a good message that is kind of trying to send. I feel like in the movie, like I know like the rating is like offensive in R, but like I think like if you're trying to look at it in like the best light, they're like, hey, for our next generation, because they're talking about the kids are going to be the ones that are going to like rule the next generation. It's like maybe people can come together more. And I think that's like what it's trying to say. It's like maybe there's a middle ground that everybody can like be helped in the sense of like the janitor, yes, is considered a spot very low in the sense of like he doesn't make a lot of money. He has to clean up after other people. And yet in this case, like even though he does have power over the principal in the sense of catching him doing the wrong thing, instead of exerting that power, he's like, hey, let's talk about it.
Yeah, and they're just sitting there like slamming back beers.
As like equals.
Yeah, it's interesting that they're drinking beer in the basement of a school. Talking about life and talking about careers. But yeah, I'm glad you brought up the USCCB rating. It's, you know, I looked at this movie and as I started to think about it a little bit, to me, it was not a story about the Breakfast Club. It's a story about the adults in their life, their lives.
Yeah, because in a way, like most of the things that they're talking about is how their parents treat them.
Yeah. Right? And first of all, I want to put this out there. At a certain, like, especially as kids get older, parents have less and less control on how their kids interact with them, especially if their kids are out and about, right? As they probably should be, right?
Yeah.
And so the problem is that all of the adults in their life and the principal, I think, is the perfect surrogate for all of these parents. They have made some pretty critical mistakes raising their kids. For Andrew, his father is not only, you know, pressuring him to perform and to be a winner all the time. He also has instilled this sense of like high school is the place where you do get to goof off, or you should be able to goof off. And
high school will be the best 4 years of your life.
So this is something that like growing up in a small town is like very, very common. Yeah. Like it's almost like nepotism in a sense of like, oh, I just want to like, they like want to relive their high school. And like each generation is like trying to do the same thing that the ones
and I mean,
before.
I mean, I can't say I grew up in a small town in the sense that you did, because like the small town I grew up in is surrounded by like 6 other small towns. Like it's a suburb within like the Twin Cities.
Yeah.
So it's a bunch of small towns that are just like slapped next to each other.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. So, but from my understanding, and I also say this having worked at specifically a Catholic school in a small town, that most people who grow up in this small town tend to stay there.
Yeah, there's a desire, I think, in a lot of them to
leave. Most of the time.
But I think what I was getting at with at least relationship with this character is that like they see high school as like the pinnacle of their life, and they're like, oh, like I think each of the like some of the parents have good intentions. They just do it in the wrong way. Of like, he wants something better for his kid than he did, but like he also is like asserting like his own ideas into him.
He's trying to live his adult. He's trying to relive his high school days vicariously through his kids.
Yes, exactly.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's a great way to put it. And so I got this impression that like he's had this bad influence on his son, and now his son finally decided just out of the blue, since he's clearly a good kid, right? He doesn't know how to be bad, and so the time that he chooses to be bad, he does something that is legitimately like not good.
Well, and even his dad says this at the beginning. It's just like, you're in here because you got caught, not because you did a bad thing.
Yeah.
So and then
I think it just goes to show though, like of his character that like he knows how to stand up for what is right. Like he keeps trying to defend the people that Bender is attacking.
Yeah.
So like he does have like a sense of what's good, and clearly when he talks about like what he did, he's very remorseful for it, and he does not like it whatsoever. And it's just like, but he's not willing to stand up for himself against his dad.
Yeah, he still has to assert his identity against his father, and he clearly does not like wrestling. Actually, he said
he feels like a racehorse. Yeah,
he feels like he's just being pressured to do wrestling as like a way for his dad to live through him.
And in a way, I think like because like he had mentioned that he wants to get injured so that he's no longer even like in his I think he was picking a fight a little bit with Bender to try to get like something to happen, like maybe potentially getting injured outside of just like defending the other people.
Well, and at one point they do kind of tussle, and Andrew easily takes on Bender until Bender pulls out the knife, which, mind you, he sticks in the back chair next to Allison, and then Allison takes it and steals it and puts it in her bag. Again, just like stealing all this crap. I'm surprised there was not a scene later on in the movie where he's just like, she dumps out her bag and he's just like, hey, what is this? Like, you know? But yeah, he pulls out the knife because for him, that's now survival, right?
Right.
Because he knows that he can't wrestle the other guy out. But like the thing is, he didn't pull it out at that time. So he's not legitimately trying to kill the other person. He's just threatening him.
Yeah.
He's like, yeah, but you don't know what it's like on the street. Basically is what he's saying.
Yeah. Well, and let's talk about some of the other kids. So Claire is in a higher socioeconomic class.
Yep.
She has the diamond earring.
She has the sushi, and
her problem is that she gets pressured to perform by her peers in terms of like being a part of the social dynamic and conforming to that, and so that results in her having this very pristine appearance. Clearly, she comes from like probably a religious background based on her conservative beliefs about sex, and the most interesting thing about her parents is that they clearly are not in love with each other. They are not.
They're using her to get at each other.
Yes, they basically Claire's a weapon, and they use. They basically have Claire misbehave as a way to get back at the other parent, and so that's not a healthy dynamic either. But I think you see her break down the most in this movie, even maybe more so than John, because John, who is on the complete opposite end of the socioeconomic spectrum, where he's from a poor family with physically abusive parents.
And mentally abusive.
Abusive in pretty much every way.
Every way, yeah. He basically like insults her status. And
well, because he's trying to get a rise out of her, but also like, he's so mad at himself, he just lashes out at other people.
yes.
Yeah.
And so he basically tears her down, and that really puts her on edge. Brian is, I know we relate to the most of this, so I don't necessarily have to share my own personal experience, but yeah, like academically successful, is kind of pressured by his parents to always be successful in everything that he does in society, in terms of like smarts and grades. And that's where you see the snippet of conversation at the start of the movie where his mom is chastising him, so that he can get good grades.
Even his like younger sibling
Yes.
is just like, yeah.
Well, and her mom tells him to study. And he's like, but I'm in detention. Like, what do I? She's like, you find a way to be productive, is what she tells him. Literally.
Which, in a way, like if you are going to detention, I think it is right for like to be a little chastising to your kid.
Yes.
But not to that extent, though.
And again, I think this is one of the cases where it's like, I don't think with Claire that her parents are doing the right thing at all.
No.
Like, clearly there's something wrong here when you're fighting over like, and it's, the kid just winds up being a pawn in their game.
Yeah.
But I think with like Brian, I think they recognize that he is smart. He can get good grades. And like maybe to them, they're just like, oh, we want to like try to like have him get the best opportunity. Because they have a larger family, it seems like, with like all the little kids and stuff. And it's like maybe he's one of them that can like have a better outcome than they did.
Well,
but I don't think putting that kind of pressure on him is good at all.
No.
they are blatantly ignoring
The fact that he tried to commit
the
suicide.
fact that he was contemplating suicide. And I imagine that's going to continue to go unaddressed.
So this is like an interesting point too. Okay. Each of the characters makes some kind of development, right, throughout the movie.
Mhm.
Like Andrew is going to stand up. Seems like he's going to stand up to his dad. Like he's kind of felt a little bit more liberated on this. Bender and Claire are getting together, whatever. And, and like she has like the basket case has like changed where she's like all dressed up and whatnot. But like Brian doesn't really change that much from like the beginning of the movie to the end of the movie. Unfortunately, like I think maybe he becomes a little bit more like able to express his emotions,
Yeah.
and connect
Yes.
with people a little bit more. But like, I feel like he's going to be in the same exact spot. Like not like
Well,
struggling with the same things.
he can
Yeah.
get in line. All 5 of them are going to have the same problems going forward.
Yeah.
And that's the thing about this movie is it does not resolve their problems.
Mm-hmm.
It, for a brief moment, allows them to connect. And I don't see them walking away necessarily as friends. I see them walking away with an understanding, because even in the movie, they talk like there's dialogue about this where they're like, hey, we're just going to hang out for today, and what? Like next week in the hallway, if you see me, you're just going to ignore me or laugh at me or whatever. And like, cause as if you walked up to me, like Bender was making this point to Claire, like if you walked up to me and said hi to me, your friends would think you're nuts.
Mm-hmm.
And he makes a valid point, right? These social cliques are really hard to bridge across. And if you are not a very assertive and independent person, you're going to get dragged under by that.
Well, even like they go to mention that like Brian's not like an antisocial person. He's involved with groups.
He's in the
Just
physics club.
The math club, the physics club, yeah.
Just the smart club, or the what do they call them? Academic clubs.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, those aren't the social clubs. And you're just
Yeah.
like, okay, well, they're, yeah.
Well, even Bender was just like when he was like comparing Brian's clubs to Claire's clubs, he was like, okay, but at least what Brian's doing is social.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of thing. I can't remember what she was saying that like she was involved in, but
Well, they were trying to get to the point of like, Claire doesn't really do, she's one of those points where it's like, she's popular, but she doesn't really do any activities.
Yeah.
yeah,
Right? Where she's like in clubs, but they're not like ones that actually do things like
Well,
the
the
academic-
things that they deal with are like prom and stuff
Yeah.
like that. They don't actually try to be out there in the school. They're just planning their events that are like the traditional high school events. At least that's what I would assume based on their conversation.
Makes
and
sense.
I think that's something that they relate on is like a lot of the characters just don't have like confidence in themselves to like do things that they're uncomfortable with. So it's like she just goes with the flow. Everyone just like, it seems like all of them kind of just go with the flow.
Well, and Allison is like a drifter, basically.
Oh yeah.
You know, her when she's finally asked about her parents and she finally is inclined to tell, and this is another thing that tells me that Andrew is a good kid. He genuinely talks to her and asks her, what is your problem? Right?
He's the one who seems like who cares the most about her.
Yeah. And
he's just like, there's something going on here. Like, are you okay? Please tell me what's the matter.
And yeah, and her response is just, my parents ignore me. Like, she just does not get any oversight from them. She doesn't get any care from them.
At the very beginning, like when she gets dropped off, she goes to like say hi and they just pull up.
Yeah, they just leave, you know?
And they don't even say goodbye. Yeah, like she is like that's the reason why she has to, they try to have something like solve her problems for her by sending her to a shrink.
Yeah,
and it's like, it's not going to work because you're not being a parent.
Yeah. Well, and it's no wonder then that she's an outcast, right? Because her parents ignore her. And so she's used to just being alone. And also in that sense, right, she just looks out for herself. And so eventually she's kind of the assist in a sense. She's complementary to the way John pushes buttons because she's a compulsive liar and she just ends up lying in order to get other people to talk. Right.
Well, yeah, in a way, I think she's the least wanting to be vulnerable out of all of them. Because I don't know if she was like hurt in some way, because like when Andrew tries to come out and is like, hey, this is like what I feel like, and like when they're one-on-one, and she's just like, okay, because she doesn't want to try to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
Like, so her way of doing that is like, I'm just gonna like, instead of, because I'm ignored so much, I'm just going to be like as crazy as possible. And that's what I'm just going to like throw out there to like try to get people's attention and try to get like something without actually being vulnerable myself.
Mm. I think at the end of the day, when I walked away from this movie, I thought about the kids a lot. I thought about actually the parents more than I expected to, and especially with the principal being a surrogate and a surrogate character in a sense for these parents of stand-in. At the end of the day, these kids are not loved very well. They're not I'm going to say they're not understood. No one can understand me. And
the parents don't make an attempt to understand.
The parents don't bring themselves down to the kids' level. And so there is a lot of this there where the parents have not loved their kids very well. For Andrew, his dad pressures him to basically be the high schooler that his dad was not, or whatever.
Be the man he wanted to be.
Yeah. For Claire, she's just a weapon in her parents' relationship. For Brian, he's just told to like, he's basically Andrew in the sense that he's told to just succeed, but it's at his grades, right? And at being academically successful. And he finally reaches a course, shop class, which in some ways makes sense that he's maybe not as good at if he's book smart. And he really struggles with that he has problems with that. And as a kid who probably doesn't deal with failure very well, that's going to cause problems. And I can say that because that's me, right? I've had to grow and learn how to deal with failure, and I'm still working on it. And so, and so then you get to Bender, who is being like physically and emotionally abused, and he's just not like, home is not a good environment for him.
Like it's not safe.
Yeah. And so he has outbursts, right? He wants to be, he in a sense, he wants to be understood, but clearly the principal is not the figure who.
Well, and he's like, he's got a lot of,
there's a lot of baggage.
There's a lot of baggage, and there's a lot of things that he's just like constantly bottling up. And then it's like, what do you do when the bottle gets too full?
Yes.
The cork's gonna pop right out, and like he's gonna lash out.
Well, and the thing is, he has such a low self-image of himself because his dad is like constantly telling him that he's a loser and whatnot.
Yeah, and it's like you said,
he
the
believes
principal,
it himself.
The principal's not helping either, because even the principal sees him as like a pile of garbage.
And the thing is, I think he has a desire to want to be better, but he just believes so badly that he is like going to be a criminal, just going to be garbage.
Yeah.
That he doesn't even care what anybody says to him. He almost like exit on because he's like, well, that's just what I am. So like, bring it.
Well,
It's what I am. So why should I stop now?
Yeah. And at the end of the day, these parenting issues have progressed to a point where the kids are now trying to find help elsewhere. And so that's why you end up with marijuana, you end up doing like borderline criminal stuff, sexual assault, right? They're trying to find all these, they end up lashing out in all these other ways, because they don't get that love and that care from home, and they don't know what it is like to be compassionate and be empathetic for others, because they don't get that from their parents. And they certainly don't get that from the principal in a lot of ways. So
this is a heavy movie.
This movie left me really sad, and it's hard. It's hard to talk about. But I think with this, yes, there's a lot of offensive stuff in this movie. At the end of the day, it's not necessarily trying to justify the kid's behavior. It certainly glorifies it in a sense. I do find it funny.
They just really prop up the Bender character of like, I don't know what. I can't stop. Like the first time I watched it, I'm like, why are they promoting this guy so much when he's just like a deviant?
I think he's just the main character of the film.
Yeah.
Because he promotes everything. He's the active person.
Yeah.
But the one thing I wanted to point out is when they're going their whole dance montage after they've been smoking weed. And at one point, Andrew's in this like glass conference room.
Yeah, just by himself.
And he breaks the glass.
Everybody else is like in the circle, right? And then he's just off by himself in this room.
He's having a whole dance number. Actually, they all get their dance numbers, right? Like,
and they're very much like
on.
Their personalities. Comes out.
But yeah, at the end of the day, these are kids who have not been loved very well, and it's resulting in a lot of really destructive behavior because they don't know what it's like to be compassionate and empathetic towards one another. And at the end of the movie, they get that moment where they actually do see the other four people, and not just like see them as the stereotypes, but also see past that and see what might be motivating those behaviors.
They start to see them more as people.
Yeah. And they come to an understanding in typical kind of like teenage fashion. The ways they react to that experience of understanding can sometimes be a little overmuch.
Yeah.
I do think it's really cool that Claire props Allison up and teaches her maybe how, maybe not just through the makeup and everything, but like Allison learns how to like maybe love herself a little.
Yeah, because I don't think it's necessarily like you have to dress in a certain way.
Yes.
I mean, maybe that, but like to the way she was dressing before, it's like she doesn't actually like appreciate herself. She just like wears whatever the heck, like, I don't know, rags,
well,
basically.
some days, especially on Saturdays, you just got to wake up one shoe at a time like the rest of us.
But I do think there's one note to say that like I don't like we don't promote the smoking of weed, but but I do think like you had mentioned, I think each of these characters was very bottled up, and they were like, I think the reason of like them using that through like film or whatnot is a way of like allowing them to open up. Because like I feel like in some ways, some people use this as a crutch of like, oh, I'm gonna drink to be able to like be social or whatever. But I think it's just like people being more comfortable with being able to be vulnerable.
Like that's exactly it.
Yeah.
I think some of the aspects of this, like adding the weed in there, are more just for John's characterization. The important thing is you can connect like this without having to drink or smoke or do any of these things. You can sit down and you can talk about these things, and you can be doing other activities. But the whole point of the film is to connect and to understand, and maybe you'll find that you actually appreciate the other person and where they're coming from. And I think at the end of the film, they get there, and I don't get the sense, as they pointed out in the movie, like even the characters themselves, that I don't get the sense that this will last forever, but this is a net positive experience for them, because it shows them, at least emotionally, it's a net positive experience for them because they get to learn about each other and they get to try to empathize and have compassion for one another. It just takes them a really long time to get there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, clearly because they're like struggling with things.
Well, and ironically with Vernon, right, he's the catalyst for this, because the only thing that they all hated more than each other was him.
Yeah.
And so that kind of was the catalyst for them bonding, because with John's shenanigans, they either had to band together or, well,
it's like through adversity, right?
Yeah.
You band together.
Yeah.
At a high school level of adversity. But
yeah,
I do think, like, to a certain degree, maybe it doesn't like weigh too much on this, but like, I do think what your parents do does affect you very much.
It does.
Yeah.
But I feel like they almost, in a way, overemphasize it a little bit.
Maybe a little.
Maybe. Yeah.
Because, like, I don't know. Because I would say, to a certain degree, I connect most with Brian. But, like, I don't think my parents were anything like his parents. Like, I think most of the pressure was literally just by myself. Because, like, I had just a really high standard for myself that just came from, like, within.
You have siblings, right?
Yeah. And I'm also, like, to a certain degree, I'm the youngest.
Yes.
And I'm like, oh, I need to do better than they did.
You have to follow. Yeah, and I'm the youngest of like 5, and so you see the others go before you, and in the places where they screw up, it's okay to screw up, and you just learn from it and you move forward. And in the places where where they succeed, you feel that pressure to just succeed and like effortlessly almost,
Mm-hmm.
And so when you have that problem, I don't know if Brian's necessarily in the film. Brian is the oldest of his family, but he definitely has that pressure to just be academically successful, and his parents don't care how he does it. Just like they expect to see A's on his report card,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I know that, like, yeah, my parents were definitely not anything right like Brian's. Like, I think at the end of the day, a lot of that pressure is one that we put on ourselves. And just for little moment of vulnerability here. So you guys know this, and I'm fairly open about it with people.
Mm-hmm.
But like, I was like, I got diagnosed when I was 2 years old with ASD, which for those of you who don't know is autism spectrum disorder. And like that, there are some good things that come with it, but like, it is also one of those things where it's like, it is hindering on somewhat of because it's a developmental disorder.
Mm-hmm.
There are social hindrances that come with it.
Yeah.
And I mean, like, I didn't really, I guess I don't get this from my parents, but I definitely got the feeling a lot. And like, there might've been some external pressure, but I think there was a lot of pressure on myself where it's just like, it's like, oh, like you can't do, like, a lot of telling myself, like, I can't do this because I think differently than everyone else. Mm-hmm. And so one thing that I have struggled a lot with is having to constantly prove to everybody that I can function just as normally as any human being, which, like, I can, because like most people in my position, like they can't drive a car, or like they can't live on their own, or like they can't have like a decent job full time.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I'm more high functioning than most people in my position. Mm-hmm. But because of that, like, because I have some like lack of social graces, and like, I don't necessarily process everything quite the same way that everyone else does, or like, I don't pick up on certain things, and like there's a lot of like lack of understanding for most people that just don't quite get what's going on.
No.
And a defensive mechanism that I think I go through is like, well, I need to show them that, like, it's like I can do this, and I need to prove that, like, I can succeed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because I don't want you to believe that I can't, because I can, even though deep down, I don't necessarily feel I can, but I have to prove that I can make it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing.
That's a lot to put on a podcast episode that's going to go out into the world. I appreciate it.
Yeah. And like I said, I'm open about it. I'm pretty like it's the ASD is something like I've been open about this since like high school. Right. I don't mind that people know, because I'm very much an advocate of like trying to understand who other people are. But I'm also an advocate of like, I don't want people to see me, because like you guys see me around people versus like now when we're one-on-one. Yeah. I'm not a different person, but my like levels of energy are very opposite.
Yeah.
Like I consider myself a pretty authentic person, but like more one-on-one, it's like I'm a little more grounded because there's like less stimulation going on.
Yeah.
And like I think people get a lot better sense of like me as a person, and like my values and my character and whatnot in a little bit more of an environment like this. And that's like, it's one of those things where it's like, this is a side I really, really want people to see. But when there's like a bunch of people around, it's really, really hard for people to get a gauge on that. So it's like I have very much like as much of maybe a little bit more of a desire for people to see who I am as a person than me try to understand them. And that's not saying I don't want to understand who people are or like where they came from or like their stories, because it's like I definitely want to see who people are. And like I'm a pretty sociable person, or at least I hope I am. But like I always want to try to get to know people, but I also really want people to get to know me, so that if I am kind of like, if it does look like I'm acting a little bit crazy, they can just be like they're not just like, oh, he's kind of a nutcase kind of thing.
Yeah.
Well, I think there is one of those things of like, nobody's normal. Like, I don't know why they're like people are like, oh, this is like the normal thing. At least for me in high school, like I just embraced the awkward, because I'm like, I don't want to be normal. I'm not the most popular kid like Claire would have been or whatever. I'm just like, I'm just going to be weird, and it's okay.
Yeah. Well, I purposely didn't set out in high school to be particularly popular. I'm a band kid through and through, you know? So
they didn't have any band kids in the, they apparently don't go to detention.
I didn't have a shop class, you know? Band kids don't go to detention.
So I mean, you could say I was like Brian, but I was good at shop class. Oh,
yoink,
rip.
But
yeah, and I mean, kind of like I know you grew up in kind of a little bit more of a rural public school. Was your public school like rural, or was it like a little bit more like in the city?
Because this one's like right outside of Chicago, right? Like that's kind of what they're
Chicago.
Because I mean, like my high school, it's like what, maybe 15 minutes from here or so. So like somewhat close to a city. So like and I didn't necessarily feel like, I don't think I had a bad high school experience. Like I was fortunate enough to have a graduating class that like there were the cliques, but we weren't but we didn't refuse to talk to anybody outside of that. Right. Like I was, I had a conversation with somebody earlier this week where it's like one of our theology on tap speaker this week, actually went to high school with me. And she was like, I would argue that she was probably one of the most popular girls in school. So, I mean, to be honest, I was amazed she actually like recognized me at all.
Yeah.
And she acknowledged, she's like, hey, like, I think you went to Matamita. I'm like, yeah, I did. Like, I'm like, yeah, like I saw you were one of her speakers. I'm like, oh, I went to high school with her. Well, she didn't graduate in my class. She graduated in the class before me. But she was, she's one of the most popular girls in the school. And kind of upon reflection, I was popular, but in a different way. right? Like I was one of the the choir and band and theater kids.
Yeah.
Like I was one of the geekier kids. However, I was like, well, yeah, like, and like I had my insecurities where it's like I want to be friends with people. I want to have friends and all that.
Yeah.
But I was also like I was also someone that got along with everybody fairly well. Like I was like, I mean, I've always been told I'm a pretty authentic person. And like I've had people tell me that. So like even some of the more popular girls in my class, like there are two girls in particular that were like they were popular where they gave the commencement speech. Mm-hmm. They were actually two really close friends of mine.
Wow.
Which like stereotypically doesn't make sense. But like these were people that like, you know, they took the time to like get to know me and like kind of see who I was. Unfortunately, we kind of dropped out of touch as time went on. But like, but I just remember I'm like, yeah, like these are two people I respected a great deal. And a part of that was because they saw me past the socially awkward, performing arts kid. Like they're just like, he is a good guy and he is trying so hard to be. Like actually I had went through a bit of a depression phase in high school. And one of them even like behind my back arranged a meeting with a guidance counselor. And she's just like, I called our guidance counselor. We are going to go see him. Mm-hmm. And it's like, that's something I'm probably never going to forget. But yeah, it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, so my high school experience and like my experience with like the social like cliques and stuff kind of defied most stereotypes. And that was what was so cool about my graduating class. I mean, I can't speak for others that I graduated with, but like for my experience in particular, like there wasn't as much of those like stereotypes or like, we're not going to talk to you because you do this thing.
Well, and what were the graduating class sizes here? So what was around
270?
Around 270, John?
63.
Okay, I was 600 something. So I had like a city.
Yeah, we have like a scale.
Yeah. So I came from a really big high school. It was actually they had an east and a west school that were the same district, but just my side of it alone was like 600 something. And so with the band, I interacted a lot with the band kids because I was in a lot of band stuff. I was in like the main band, right? And I was also in like jazz ensemble as well. And so that happened during lunch hour. And so I often just ate my lunch in the band room. I didn't even go to the cafeteria very much. Maybe like once or twice a week. And I didn't really interact with people very much there. So my social experience was really isolated to band kids and then all the classes that I was in. And so you couldn't know everybody in the class, not by a long shot. It was a very big place. So my experience was also a little different in that sense, but I don't know. I probably wasn't friends with like the most popular person in my grade. I don't know. It was interesting. At one point I took a class my senior year that was not, and I guess they were honors courses too.
I will admit I was a bit of a rarer case in that regard.
Okay. But yeah, like I was in mostly honors courses. And so I also stuck to those kids, which a lot of them were in band too. And then at one point in my senior year, I took a class that was not honors. And I got to see other classmates that I never met before. I hadn't even seen them.
If it says anything on the difference of scale, so because of being like in band and choir and sports, like my school, you knew people that were 3 years older and 3 years younger. Like you knew the entire school. Like it wasn't like there's like people you had never met before because like for, I don't know, 12 years or whatever, people had been together like going, because the thing was the elementary, middle school and high school were all connected. So like you saw everybody.
Yep.
And I mean, maybe having siblings that were like higher up in high school that
What
I knew,
up,
like,
little Johnny?
It was easier to like know the older people. But like, I don't know. I wouldn't say that I was like a popular person in school, but like I was involved in so many different things because it was such a small school. I was able to be in everything.
Yeah.
Popularity probably has a different meaning, I guess, in your situation.
Most of the time for guys, it was like if you were like the star athlete, you
Yes.
were like the popular person.
Yeah.
So that's like kind of referring to this movie, right? Where the pretty one and the sports guy are like the two, like in the popular group, right?
Yeah. They're the most conventionally
Yeah.
popular.
So it was similar to that.
So yeah, final thoughts on the movie, guys.
I have a couple. One is
I just want to like
Yeah.
one mention
Yes.
though. Like I find it interesting that the basket case at the beginning of the movie was shown to be with a guidance counselor, right? Like she's going to a shrink.
Mhm.
Why wasn't Brian sent to a shrink or like to the
good-
guidance counselor? after
they
were
all
caught?
they all should
Yeah, they
be seeing a guidance
all of
counselor.
them could have
Well,
gone to the guidance
keep
counselor.
in mind-
Yeah, Brian especially should, because like he brought a gun to school.
Well,
Yeah.
keep in mind his situation is still very fresh, so they only recently found out about this.
fair.
True. Okay.
They haven't had a chance to even get him there. And I also just want to point out something else, because it might seem like we're being woefully inconsiderate of like all the different aspects of parenting, because none of us are parents here.
yeah,
Yeah.
we promise we're not.
and you're gonna make mistakes as a parent.
Yeah,
Like,
you are
it's
going to
just
make
gonna
mistakes as a
happen.
parent, and it's not to say necessarily that all these parents are inherently bad parents, except maybe for the ones that are being like physically and
Oh, like
emotionally
Bender's
abusive.
parents.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But parenting is a very complicated job, and it's very hard to keep track of all of that and to raise your kid in a way that they have as good of, if not a better life than you did. And so I just want listeners to keep that in mind. We're not trying to put down the parents here. It's just that the structure of the film clearly shows that these parents have made some critical mistakes in trying to raise their kids, and it's clear that their kids are not being loved and supported as they should be. I guess that's kind of my final thought. This movie's about kids who are slowly learning to understand and be compassionate towards each other.
Mm-hmm.
And at least for them, it's a somewhat fleeting moment. But it's not just their story. It's also the story of this principal who has long lost all the passion for his job and has just turned into a narcissistic jerk. And it's also the story of the parents who have maybe not treated their kids very well, you know, and as a result, their kids are trying to find that guidance and that love and that care. They're trying to look for that somewhere else because they're not getting it at home. So that's just, the movie has a lot of fun moments, but it just kind of rings very darkly for me. And so it's hard for me to understand why the cultural outlook on it is so like fun. Maybe I've been misinterpreting the cultural outlook on the movie, but it seems like people tend to think of Breakfast Club as like a really fun movie. It's like I'm watching this going, this is dark.
Yeah.
Like this is really dark.
I mean, you can see some like crossovers with like Ferris Bueller. Like, there's definitely some dark moments.
Yeah.
That-
It's been a
It's
long
a very
time.
it's a very deep movie.
Yeah.
Is a
But,
good way- is another way
I
to put
don't
it.
know. There's definitely some movies that are dark that like the general populace likes.
Yeah.
Like The Last Jedi.
Do you really want to go there?
We had to make a
Like, right
reference,
now?
but no, we're not starting. It's already like an hour and a half.
I'm
in.
stepping
We're-
back. I was not
For
going to
now,
say anything more.
when we get to Last Jedi, you can go as ham as you want.
All right. I rest my case. Someone had to bring
Anyway.
levity to this.
So I have a couple final thoughts. I mean, as far as like what I thought about the movie, it's like very much like I think I've said everything that I think I needed to say.
Yeah.
But the first thing is actually a fun trivia bit. So I talk about Psych a lot. It's my favorite show. 5 out of the 7 main cast members have actually appeared in Psych.
Really?
Oh,
Yeah. So we got the janitor is has appeared a couple times as the new mayor of Santa Barbara.
Okay.
Okay. Molly Ringwald, who was the princess.
Yep.
Guest stars as a doctor in a psychiatric facility.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Wait, which one's that?
Molly Ringwald, the princess, Claire.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
Anthony Michael Hall, who was Brian, appears as Harris Trout, who was a bizarre and mean police chief kind of toward the end of the show.
Interesting.
Okay.
Judd Nelson, who plays Bender, is a doctor at a lab. Also like a weird character, but like pretty funny character. And then Ali Sheedy, who was Allison, probably the most like her character in Breakfast Club is Mr. Yang.
Okay.
Who's like a really
spoiler.
Who's like a crazy serial killer.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
Okay.
So, I mean, it's understandable that they didn't get Emilio Estevez because he's a little popular.
Actually, because I listen to a psych podcast. They're trying to get, because they've tried to get him.
Yeah.
And I think they're trying to get him for like a future psych movie, which I really hope they do, because that would be really cool to have like what's commonly known as the Brat Pack appear in psych at some point in the series.
Yeah.
You know, it's like a weird random thing. So Emilio Estevez is actually
Charlie Sheen's cousin.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
I didn't know that.
Even though they have different last names. Anyway.
So that's my first final thought. My second final thought, and what after this we can get to scores. Listeners and viewers, this is more of a message to you. If you are struggling with any of the things the kids are struggling with, or even like, because I know some of our listeners might be like parents, right? Like if there's anything that you are struggling with, like with these issues, or like just any issues you have, like please go see a therapist, or like a spiritual director. Because ultimately, like, I mean, you can say God created you in his image and likeness. And while you know that, you might not always feel that way.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really important distinction. I know I have felt, and kind of honestly sometimes do feel that way more often than not, but like go see a therapist, like, because ultimately healing is what needs to be done. Right. Yeah. Like seek healing if you need it. There are resources out there that want you to be like better and healthy and the very best version of you.
Yeah.
So, and the Genesius podcast does endorse going to therapy and going to spiritual direction.
Yep. I do go to therapy. I have a therapist. It's been very, very helpful for me in ways that I did not expect, because I was very skeptical going into it. And so even if you are skeptical, it's always good to try, right?
I had an area of healing. I don't see this therapist anymore. I'm actually looking I'm currently seeking out a new therapist. I've had a little bit of trouble with that, but yeah. I know there was one point of healing that I needed a couple years ago where I actually completed a journey of healing process with him.
Wow.
And it's like when I entered, I was like broken up about it, but now I'm just like, yeah, it's in the past. There's closure, and like it's all good.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, therapy is a wonderful thing.
Yeah. And there is like you can find Catholic therapists.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to do.
But also like for some reason, just like I think that like kind of reminded me of part of the movie of just like them recognizing like, oh, if we like continue these struggles, right, we become our parents.
Yes.
And that was just like them realizing it's like, yeah, you kind of want to get this stuff like worked out before, or if you are a parent, to get it worked out at that time of like raising your kids too.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's sometimes it's when we're raising kids, right, that you'll find those things that you need help with. And it's always okay to ask for help.
Yeah. It's actually asking for help and acknowledging weakness is a sign of strength.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to thank you guys for talking.
Wow.
About this movie. That was a lot. That's a lot.
This was probably the deepest we've ever gone on this show.
There are moments of this that, like, in my head, I'm like, do I need to edit that? I was like, we'll see, but like, I think there's a lot of really good conversation in there. And we
really hope this conversation sparks conversation between you and your peers as well.
Yep.
Before we do our final plugs, let's get to scores.
Yes, of course.
So we've talked about our thoughts. I feel like we can just knock out some numbers.
Sure. Yeah.
So I'm gonna go first. 98.
98.
98.
Wow.
Okay, this is probably going to be the biggest separation.
I really, really unironically love this movie.
Okay.
And I do connect with it in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm.
John?
Oh, you want me to go?
I'm gonna point
let's
to
mix
you.
it up.
Okay.
I need to flip a coin.
I'm going to preface with I do think it's like a decent movie. I do think it addresses like good points and like brings up conversation and like it does like build a lot on the characters. And I do think some of the writing is pretty good. I just don't really feel like it's a movie I need to like watch more. Like I kind of like I've seen it a couple of times. I like it. I understand the characters. I understand what they're going through. But I don't really like feel like I'm want to come back to it. If that makes sense.
That's fair.
Well,
so for me, I think we could go with like a 78.
Okay. I would like to point out the score is not I want to 100% I want to go watch this again.
Yes. Yeah.
But okay, 78, that's good. Okay. This was interesting. I was trying to think a lot about this movie.
I will laugh if he says 88.
That was not the number I was thinking of. But I can see why this movie is pretty widely known. I think it's very much an 80s movie. It's very much a John Hughes movie. In that sense. I could probably watch any other film and be like, yeah, that's his style, right? Any other film of his. I think this movie is somewhat maybe misunderstood, or maybe it's perfectly understood by the broader culture, and I'm just way behind. I don't know. I want to call it a 70. I think some of the stylistic aspects of it are difficult. They're in stark contrast to what it's trying to talk about. Oh, 70? Should I do 70?
It's your score, dude.
It's my score. Yeah, I'll do 75.
75.
Oh.
75.
All right, 98.
See, the thing is, like, I think at some point I want to come up with a grid and like a criteria of like what I come up with. But like in general, right now, I'm kind of thinking of it as like a grade score. Like it's about like C plus, right?
Well, I mean, with the number score that does determine a grade score. So in this case, it rounds out to an 83 2/3, which rounds up to an 84.
Well, it's almost 88.
Well, and I want to point out, John,
it gives it a solid B.
Yeah.
Well, and John,
solid B.
I want to point out that kind of like you, I'm not sure I want to come back to this movie very much. I don't know what the rewatch value necessarily is in it.
I think it depends on the person.
It's also really uncomfortable for me to watch, and maybe
there's definitely really uncomfortable moments in the movie, and like some that are just like, I don't think are appropriate anymore. I think the way that the contrast happens though between some of the fun aspects of it and also the more serious things. It's a good relationship study, and it's a good way of seeing some of the possibilities of maybe how the parents' conflicts or the parents' lack of love for the kids really shows forth. So I think it's pretty well written in that sense. So yeah,
awesome.
Yeah, thank you guys for talking about the Breakfast Club with me, and thank you everyone for tuning in to this episode of the Genesius podcast. If you enjoyed our content, and unlike the OCCB, if you did not find our content offensive, and you want to hear more or watch more, please subscribe to our podcast. You can find us on most podcasting platforms, including Apple, Google, Spotify, and more. Please also, if you feel so inclined, subscribe to our YouTube channel, Genesius Podcast. I believe now that YouTube has handles, it's at Genesius Podcast.
We have double digits in subscribers now.
Wow. All right. We're built, guys. Factors of 10. Factors of 10. Next one's 100. Yeah. But
That'd be so cool.
That would be pretty great. Yeah. So YouTube channel at Genesius Podcast. Little fun experiment we're trying out. If you want to see us do these podcasts and some pretty cool Lego sets. And I want to step behind you. I also want to point out, for those that are listening on the podcast, you're not necessarily missing content. This is a podcast first and foremost.
Mm-hmm.
It is fun to, at least I think, I hope this isn't narcissistic. I find it fun in some cases to watch back some of the moments from the first 2 episodes.
Oh, I definitely do. I rewatched
in the
Iron Man. Yeah, I rewatched that several times.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun. But at least, we're not going to make this a podcast for video. It is going to be a podcast. We're not going to try and do a ton of video gags. It's fun for the little moments in there.
Yeah.
So you're welcome to check us out on YouTube if you would like to do that. That is not going to be the best place necessarily to watch the podcast. So I will leave it at that.
Yeah, that's fair. And if there's a movie you want us to talk about here on Genesius, or if you have any episode ideas that are related to movies, feedback to make our show better, or if you need prayers and you specifically want us to shout out your prayer here on the pod, send us an email at genesiuspodcast@gmail.com. That's GENESIUS podcast@gmail.com. And in addition, if you know one of us 3 personally and want to be a guest here on our show, make sure, our 2 criteria is simple. You have to know one of us 3, and you have to have listened to one of our episodes. And in which case, if you're hearing this, you've clearly listened to an episode. So I feel like that goes without saying.
Yes.
But if you want to be a guest, reach out to one of us directly. Let us know what you want to talk about. And you can if you have our number, text us. I'm not going to give them out here on the pod, but
no.
If you're friends with
1,
us,
2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 0.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 0. It's amazing.
That's country code 1.
That's the phone number I use to unlock my luggage.
Oh, goodness.
Wow.
If you guys understand that joke.
I don't.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's amazing. That's the combination I have on my luggage.
Is that a psych joke?
It's Spaceballs.
Spaceballs.
I was going to say, I'm like, it's definitely something
I've never seen Spaceballs.
Oh,
Seth, we're going to change that. I love that movie. Actually, we got to get Tom to watch it too, because he's never seen it.
Yeah.
Movie night. All right. Anyway, you can reach out to us at genesiuspodcast@gmail.com.
Last but not least, please spread the word about our show by sharing it on social media or by word of mouth. Make sure you are telling whoever you're next to about us.
Why is this in the script?
Whether it be right at this moment at your family dinner or at work or a date night.
It goes something like this. Hey, Nick, have you heard about the Genesius podcast? It's a great podcast where 3 Catholic dudes talk about movies.
I've heard they pull some really... I've heard there's some shenanigans on there too.
Yeah.
Well, wherever you are, make sure you tell them about us. But more importantly, pray for us as we keep making this show.
Yeah.
Why is that in our script?
Because it's hilarious.
It is, I guess.
Prayer intentions.
I'm going to throw this out there for kids as they're growing up, just all the pressure on them, especially kids that are not in loving homes. For parents, especially new parents, especially parents who maybe they have their own stuff to deal with, right? They are, as human, parents are just like us, right? They've got our own hopes. They've got their own hopes, dreams, and fears. So yeah, for families, just in general.
Mm-hmm. Yes, for sure. I would also offer a prayer just for anyone who is struggling with mental and emotional help, that they can that they can seek the guidance they need to live real and authentic lives with the just going boldly, knowing that God loves them and that he created him in his image and likeness and is always watching out for you.
Yeah, I'd also like to pray for all of those struggling with poverty in some way, or the societal pressure of that on their life, similar to that of Bender's situation.
Yeah. I think since I made both of you give the prayers last week,
You also said you would.
I also said I would, and so
And we follow through. So
yes, in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Lord Jesus, we offer these intentions to you today for families, for those who struggle with societal pressure, for those who struggle with poverty, for those who struggle with mental health. We are people that so desperately need love, and you give us that love, and we pray that we can learn to share it with others. We pray that we have the courage to seek help, and we pray especially just for, as life goes on, right, that we in the dark times can look to you and we can find your love, not just in prayer, but in each other. And we entrust all of these things, all of the intentions that we've brought here today, to Jesus. We entrust them to his blessed mother as we pray. Hail Mary,
full of grace, the Lord is with thee.
Blessed art thou among women,
and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Saint Genesius,
pray for us. Thanks for leading us in prayer, Seth.
Yes.
John and Seth, thank you as always for joining me today.
Thank you, Nick, for hosting.
And listeners and viewers, thank you for tuning in and hanging out with us. And until next week, we are the Genesius guys. I'm Nick.
Filling in for Kyle, I'm Seth.
And I'm John.
And this is the Genesius podcast. God bless everyone.
I had to find the button.
Oh, no.
There we go.
There it is.
Yeah, there we go.
This is like the dancing montage in the movie.
Yeah, exactly. Screaming glass break.